Smoke rolled low over the shattered compound, thick enough to chew. The forward outpost sat hunched in a bowl of rock and dust, its blast walls broken, its watchtowers punched through and listing. Bits of razor wire fluttered in the hot wind like tattered flags. Somewhere beyond the haze, mortars thumped, each impact walking a little closer. Sergeant Oakley coughed black ash out of his lungs and peered through the ruined gate. "Movement!" he yelled, squinting against the grit. Shapes emerged from the murk. A battered armored truck, hood dented, windshield cracked, lurching through the checkpoint that no longer had a gate to hold it. The engine sounded wrong, like it was running on curses and fumes. On the bed sat crates of ammo and water bottles held together by half-melted plastic wrap. On the passenger side, a door creaked open. A small figure slid down to the ground. Whoever wore field gear at least a size too big, sleeves rolled twice, and still flopping, vest hanging a little low on a narrow frame. A ragged camouflage scarf covered their lower face, and a hood shadowed everything else. Dust and smoke softened the edges of the body, making them look half real. Oakley snorted. "You gotta be kidding me." Behind him, a couple of young Marines clustered, all wide eyes and adrenaline. "That our miracle reinforcement," one of them muttered. "Maybe she's here to file the complaint paperwork," another said, and they all laughed, quick and edgy. The newcomer ignored them. They reached into the truck and pulled out a long, scarred rifle case, muscles in their forearms standing out with the effort. They set it down carefully like it was something alive. Commander Rafael Torres watched from the steps of the command bunker, one hand pressed to the bleeding scrape along his temple, the other wrapped around a radio handset that still hissed nothing but static. He'd been awake for 3 days. His beard had outrun regulation. The tan lines on his face were broken by streaks of gunpowder and sweat. "Sir, the attachment's here," his comms chief, Senior Chief Ing, said beside him. "Last-minute asset from Division. Some kind of overwatch." "About time," Torres muttered. 6 days of being used as a punching bag, and they send that. The figure trudged toward the remains of a watchtower that had lost its roof in the morning barrage. Only 3 of the original 4 metal support posts remained, like broken teeth. Rubble had piled in one corner, creating a crude platform maybe 10 feet up. "That's your perch," Oakley called out, incredulous. The figure glanced up, hood shifting just enough to reveal a sliver of pale jaw. Then they gestured at the tower with a small, impatient flick of their fingers. "It's what you've got." The voice was quiet, undeniably feminine. No quaver, no apology, just a simple statement. Torres came down the steps, boots crunching glass blown out from the operations room windows. "Welcome to COP Vega," he said. "What's left of it, anyway. I'm Commander Torres, this circus's ringmaster." The woman stopped beside the base of the wrecked tower. Up close, he could see she was maybe mid-20s, 5'6" at most, compactly built. The hood of her field jacket shadowed her eyes. So it had turned everything a uniform gray. "I read the sitrep on the drive," she said. The accent was there if you listened. Northern, maybe Baltic. "Commander Torres, 3rd Group. Deployed here 4 months ago. 6 days under indirect and probing attacks. 3 Kia, 8 wounded. 1 broken SAT dish." Her gaze flicked to the twisted satellite dish lying like a dead crab near the bunker. "1 very stubborn perimeter." It made a low whistle. "You memorize fast." "It's my job to remember where people are dying," she said. Torres frowned. "And you are?" She hesitated a fraction of a heartbeat. "Call Mira." "That's not a name," Oakley muttered. "It's all you need," she replied without looking at him. As she knelt to unfasten the latches on the rifle case, the cuff of her sleeve rode up. Oakley elbowed the Marine next to him. "Oh, check this out." On the inside of her wrist, just above a faded fabric bracelet, was a small tattoo. Barely an inch long, inked in sharp black lines. A stylized cat's paw, claws extended, wrapped in a broken circle. It was simple enough that a bored private with a needle could have done it. "That it," the Marines snickered. "They sent us the girl with the hello, kitty tat." Oakley laughed. "What's that supposed to be, anyway?" "Angry house cat. Looks like a logo from those knockoff energy drinks," someone behind them added. A couple of other Marines joined in, drawn like moths to any flame of humor in the wrecked outpost. You get that at a roadside fair? Oakley called. Tell me there's a matching tramp stamp. Mira didn't flinch. If she heard them, it didn't show. Her fingers, dusty and scraped, moved over the latches with surprising delicacy. The case opened with a soft click, revealing a rifle that didn't match any standard issue Torres recognized. It was a bold action, yes, but every part looked like it had a story. The stock was a deep, worn brown, smoothed by years of handling. The barrel was long and heavy, the metal dulled by age and care. Small adjustments and aftermarket additions snapped into place with soft metallic sounds as she assembled it. Torres felt a twinge in his chest he didn't have a name for. That tattoo, that tiny piece of ink. It pulled at a corner of his memory like a hook, but the smoke and the exhaustion blurred everything. He stepped closer. You okay? He asked. One of her hands shook as she slotted the scope onto the rail. It was a fine tremor, barely there, but visible up close. Her jaw tightened. Fine, she said. The word came out short and hard. The tremor stopped the instant she wrapped her other hand around the rifle's forend. By the time she settled prone on the pile of rubble, the shaking had vanished entirely. Sir, we've got heat blooms on the north ridge. Ing shouted from inside the bunker, eyes on a flickering drone feed that survived where their satellite link hadn't. How many? Torres called. Hard to tell through the haze. 8, 10. They're staying just outside effective range of the mounted guns. Oakley swore. Picking at us again. Torres took the binoculars Ing shoved at him and raised them to his eyes. The afternoon heat made the air dance, shimmering like water. Beyond the perimeter wire, the land sloped up into broken rock and scrub. There, tiny shapes moving along the ridgeline, just at the edge where regular rifle fire turned into guesswork. Too far, Oakley muttered. 900, 1,000, 1,300, Mira said, not looking up. 1,380, give or take. Oakley snorted. There's no way you can. Wind 5 knots left to right, she continued, voice almost bored. Temperature 43. Mirage heavy. Air thin. Rifle zeroed at 800. I'll adjust. Torres blinked down at her. Can you actually? She was already behind the scope, cheeks settling against the worn stock like it was something familiar. Her breathing slowed, each inhale measured, each exhale a controlled release. The bullet list of stats she'd murmured hung in the hot air. Her right index finger found the trigger and rested there. Not squeezing, just waiting. The outpost seemed to lean in. Mortars thumped again in the distance, but none landed close. The enemy was keeping up the harassment rhythm, saving the real punishment for later. The Marines on the wall shifted behind sandbags, muttering. Seriously, like, there's no way, one of them whispered. The rifle cracked. It wasn't the harsh bark of an M4 or the chattering rattle of the .50 in the corner. It was a flat, sharp sound like a whip cutting the air. Torres kept the binoculars glued to his face. The figures on the ridge jittered with the heat waves. One of them suddenly jerked sideways, limbs spasming, then folded to the ground like a puppet with its strings cut. The others froze for a heartbeat. Jesus, Ing breathed. The brass casing bounced once on the concrete at Mira's elbow, chiming faintly. Hold up, back, forward, down. The motion was smooth, practiced, almost gentle. Second shot. Another figure dropped, this one pitching forward, sliding down a little slope in a slow, dust-raising tumble. The survivors scattered, diving for rocks, communications exploding across their line as their perfect standoff position turned into a kill zone. Target teams broken, Mira said, more to herself than anyone else. They'll reposition farther back until they realize your guns can't reach. You have maybe 20 minutes before they try a different angle. Oakley's mouth hung open. The jokes about the tattoo died somewhere in his throat. Torres lowered the binoculars slowly, eyes going from the distant ridge to the small, anonymous shape on the rubble. He'd seen good shots before, exceptional ones, but something about the way she'd done it, no bravado, no commentary, just the quiet math of it, scraped at that half-memory again. The tattoo on her wrist flashed as she cycled the bolt a third time. Cat's paw, broken circle, inked thick and sure. Torres felt his heartbeat hitch. He'd seen that mark once. Years ago, on a different wrist, in a different war, on a stretcher covered in gray dust and blood. His chest went tight. "Where did you train?" he asked quietly. "Mira's I stayed on the scope. Places that don't show up on your map." Oakley swallowed. "Well, welcome to Vega, I guess." No one laughed. The outpost, before it had turned into a smoldering ruin, had been little more than a concrete ring with a handful of prefabs inside. Cop Vega was a dot on the edge of a region the planners called permissive and the grunts called quiet until it's not. The moment Division had told Torres he'd be holding it with a lean joint team, one SEAL element, a detachment of Marines, a handful of intel and signal specialists, he known quiet was temporary. Day 1 had been dust and inventory. Day 2 had been long meetings with bored local elders. Day 3 had been the first mortar, a lonely shell that landed 10 meters outside the wire and did nothing but scare a stray dog. Day 4, the pattern started. Indirect fire that never quite landed in the same spot twice. Probing shots from distant hills. Tests. Measurements. "Feels like someone with a tape measure and bad intentions," Ing had said, watching impact points on a grid overlay. By day 6, every man and woman in Vega shared the same hollow-eyed look. Sleep came in 20-minute increments. The medics rotated ice packs across bruised shoulders and concussion headaches. Resupply was supposed to have been simple. A truck from the main base, a quick drop of ammo, water, and a couple of bodies to replace the wounded. Instead, it brought Mira. They learned very little about her that first day. She didn't volunteer conversation. When prodded, she gave minimal answers in a flat tone that made joking bounce off and fall dead at her feet. She slept in a corner of the comms room, stretched out on a poncho liner with her rifle case within arm's reach. Her hands shook when they were empty. Filling a canteen, zipping up her vest, tying her boots, the tremor made everything just a little clumsier than it should have been. The moment she touched the rifle, the shaking stopped. Her whole body stilled, like someone had flicked a switch from human to instrument. The Marines noticed, of course. So did Ing. So did Torres. "What do you think?" Ing asked him that night as they stood under the harsh glare of the perimeter lights, watching Mira's silhouette on the ruined tower. "I think Division dropped someone on us they didn't want to explain," Torres said. "Her file was scrubbed so hard it squeaks," Ing replied. "Service number, basic qualifications, and then a lot of black bars. Whoever she used to be, someone doesn't want us knowing." Torres's gaze stayed on the tower. Mira lay prone at the edge, her body profile low, barrel pointed into the dark beyond the wire. She didn't shift much. Occasionally, she adjusted her scope a millimeter, like she was tracking something only she could see. The wind blew at the hood of her jacket, snapping it around her face. For a second, Torres saw the curve of her jaw, the line of her cheek, the lighter patch of scar tissue running just under her ear. The tattoo on her wrist was hidden under a cuff now, but he remembered it with uncomfortable clarity. "I've seen that mark before," he said. "On who?" Ing asked. Torres frowned, trying to grip the slippery memory. "A long time ago," he said finally. "Different continent. Pulling bodies from a collapsed apartment block in a city whose name still smells like dust. There was a girl on one of the stretchers. Younger than Mira. Blonde hair. Same tattoo, left wrist. Special operations liaison said she was attached to some joint outfit whose designation wasn't for us to know." "Unit patch?" Ing asked. "No patch," Torres said. "Just that ink." And a whisper from one of the NATO officers. "Spectre Claw." Ing frowned. "Never heard of it." "You weren't supposed to," Torres said quietly. "Rumor was they were ghosts built into the system. Problem solvers for the kind of Knots command didn't want to admit existed." Ing whistled under his breath. "You're saying you think she's—" "I'm saying I watched a girl with that tattoo go into a body bag after a building came down on top of her," Torres said. "And whatever Mira is, she shouldn't exist." Ing was silent for a long time. The outpost hummed around them, the low mechanical breathing of generators and air units, and a lot of people pretending they weren't on the edge of something sharp. "Maybe you were wrong," Ing said eventually. Maybe it wasn't her. I was 3 feet away, Torres replied. I checked for pulse myself. There was nothing. Her wrist was gray. The ink looked wrong, like graffiti on a gravestone. People survive things they shouldn't, Ing said. Maybe she did too. On the tower, Mira readjusted her position with a small shimmy. The barrel tracked left, then right. She settled again. Scope pointed toward a blind rise that none of Vega's mounted weapons could see. Or maybe, Torres said, someone liked the legend so much they stole the ink. He didn't know which option bothered him more. The next morning came with more shells. The first 2 hit the far side of the compound, showering the motor pool with dirt and fragments. The third landed close enough that the shockwave kicked dust through every open door. Contacts trying to work in on the south berm. Oakley yelled into the radio. I got muzzle flashes in the scrub. Keep your heads down. Torres snapped from the command bunker. Let the tower do its job. Mira's voice came through Ing's headset, calm and clipped. 3-man team, low crawl, south-southeast. 1 RPG, 2 carbines. Distance 800 closing. Their spotter is slow. I'll take him first. Copy, overwatch, Ing said. You're clear to engage. Torres watched through the bunker's narrow firing slit as 3 faint shapes moved in the heat shimmer outside the wire. The rifle fired once. The trailing figure jerked, then lay still. The other 2 didn't even hear the shot before they lost their spotter. They kept moving, unaware that a pair of crosshairs had sliced the world down to the space between their shoulder blades. 2 more shots. 2 more sprawled shapes in the dust. The RPG never left the ground. Ing looked up from his console, lip twitching. Well, he said, if nothing else, she's good for morale. Of course, nothing that good goes unanswered. By late afternoon, the enemy had shifted tactics. The mortar impacts crept closer. Instead of scattered, harassing fire, they began to land in tight brackets around key points. The generator cluster, the med shack, the comms room. Someone had done their homework. Just once, Oakley shouted over the whine of incoming. I'd like to fight somebody who's bad at their job. Careful what you wish for, Ing shot back. Torres stood in the bunker, radio pressed to his ear, trying to raise anyone who could send air support. All he got was broken phrases, half-finished acknowledgments crushed by a wall of static. They're hitting our link, Ing said, checking a secondary antenna readout. That's not random interference. That's someone stepping on us hard. Portable jammer, probably on one of the ridges. So they know where we are, what we've got, and how far our guns reach, Torres muttered. And they sent us one ghost with a rifle to tip the scale. He slammed the handset down and stepped outside, needing the open air even if it tasted like burning plastic. The world was colorless, just shades of tan and gray, smoke and dust flattening everything. The watchtower was half obscured in the haze, its silhouette like a broken finger. On top of it, Mira stayed laid out behind her rifle like a piece of the structure. Torres climbed up. The ascent was a messy scramble through twisted metal and broken concrete. By the time he reached the top, his hands were scraped and his lungs burned. Report, he said, dropping low beside her. She didn't look at him. Mortars have shifted east, she said. They're correcting onto your generators. My guess, 2 forward observers, one to the north, one to the east. The north team's using a small rock pinnacle about 1,900 meters out. I can see his glass flash when the sun catches it. You get him, we keep the lights, Torres said. That's the plan, Mira replied. Her sleeves had slid up again. The tattoo sat on her wrist like a brand, black and simple. Torres couldn't help it. What does it mean? He asked. Which part? She said. The cat-paw, he said. The broken circle. She was silent long enough that another mortar fell, this one hammering the far wall, and sending up a plume of dust and swearing. It was a joke, she said finally. At first. He raised an eyebrow. A joke. Unit tradition, she replied, mouth twisted. First time someone did the math and realized I had more confirmed kills than birthdays. They said I was like a stray cat that kept showing up wherever there was trouble. Small, annoying, hard to get rid of. So you marked it, Torres said. One of the other shooters drew it on my wrist with a permanent marker after a particularly bad night, she said. Someone else said if I ever stopped showing up, they'd tattoo it so nobody forgot why they were still alive. Her finger tightened on the trigger. We didn't expect them to make good on that part so fast. The rifle spoke. Far out on the haze-blurred horizon, a tiny flash of glass vanished. She breathed out slowly. "Observer north is gone," she said. "Expect a pause while they panic." "You don't have to tell me every detail of," Torres began. "This mark," she cut in, voice softer. "They made it real in a tent with a hot needle and bad ink, just off a city that doesn't look like itself anymore." We laughed about it. She shifted, adjusting her scope. "Now everyone who wore it is either underground or has become someone else." Torres stared at her profile, the scar along her jaw, the two calm eyes. "I saw one of you die," he said. Her jaw clenched. "In that city," he went on, "apartment block collapsed. We were supposed to be escorting observers, not digging bodies out of concrete. A NATO captain pointed at her, and said Spectre Claw under his breath. And then we zipped the bag. The next mortar fell far, off balance. The enemy was rattled. "Did you open it?" Mira asked. He blinked. "What?" "The bag," she said. "Did you open it?" His grip tightened on the rifle sling across his chest. "No." I checked for a pulse. I saw her eyes. There was nothing. I had a dozen other wounded screaming, bleeding. We had to move. "You didn't open it," Mira repeated. "You're telling me that was you?" he demanded. "That you just stopped," she said. "For a minute. Maybe longer. Long enough for someone to decide I fit better in a number than a bed." She finally looked at him, the hood shadow dropping back just enough that he could see both eyes. They were an odd gray-blue, washed out but sharp. "They sent a message later," she said. "Said I was dead. That my service was appreciated. That my family should be proud. I read it on a stolen terminal 3 countries away. Then I turned it off." Torres stared. The wind tugged at the torn tarp hanging from the tower's remnants. The outpost felt like it was holding its breath. "So what are you now?" he asked. She turned back to her scope. "An accounting error with a rifle," she said. "And a death." Down in the compound, someone shouted about incoming on the east wall. Mira's finger tightened again. "And since we're talking," she added, "you're welcome, Commander. For the air you're still breathing." He wanted to be offended. He wanted to assert rank, control, something solid. Instead, after a beat, he said, "Noted," and crawled back down to keep trying to get broken radio waves to carry. The real assault came at dusk. The mortar pattern changed first. Instead of scattering shells around the compound, the impacts suddenly converged on a 3-point arc around the south and east walls. "They're bracketing the breach," Ing shouted, eyes wide. "Sir, they're softening it for an infantry push." "Where?" Torres snapped. Ing pointed at the big monitor, where heat signatures rolled in a fog of grainy gray. "Here, here, and, holy sir, that's at least 200 boots, maybe more." Oakley's voice crackled through the radio, breathless. "They're massing in the draws. I've got shapes everywhere." The jammed SAT link crackled uselessly. Any hope of air support was hours and a miracle away. Torres looked around the command bunker. The walls were cracked. The generator hum sounded strained. Sweat shone on every visible face, cutting pale tracks through the dust. "Pull the outline positions in," he ordered. "We collapse to the inner ring. Make them pay for every meter." "What about the tower?" Ing asked. Torres's eyes flicked toward the door. "That tower stays manned as long as it's standing," he said. "It's the only thing keeping this from being a slaughter." When he stepped outside, the light was that strange copper color that comes just before night, making the sand look bloody. Flashes from distant muzzle fire popped across the ridges. Mira's silhouette lay still atop the tower. The first wave hit 30 minutes later. They came screaming out of the draws, a mix of local fighters and foreign volunteers, rifles and RPGs held high. Someone had whipped them into thinking this would be easy. Mira corrected that misconception one round at a time. Any RPG that left the ground died first. The grenadiers barely had time to shoulder their weapons before their bodies pinwheeled backward. Machine gun teams that tried to set up overlapping fire found their gunners dropping with neat, sudden holes appearing over their hearts. The Marines and SEALs along the inner wall poured disciplined fire into the attackers, but everyone felt it. The tower was the pivot. Without those surgical strikes, the enemy would have chewed their way in on weight alone. Tell her we owe her drinks. Oakley grunted between bursts. So many drinks. Assuming we have a bar left, Ing muttered. They held the first wave. The second hit harder, more coordinated. The mortars fell closer, one scoring a direct hit on a corner of the tower. Mira disappeared in a bloom of dust and flame. Torres' heart stopped. Tower just took a hit, someone shouted. Overwatch report. Ing yelled into his headset. Mira, come in. Static. Torres didn't think. His legs moved him toward the tower before his brain caught up. Commander, Ing shouted. You can't. Torres ran anyway. Shrapnel hissed through the air, biting at the ground around him. The concussion of near misses shoved him sideways. He stumbled, caught himself, kept going. The base of the tower was a mess of shattered concrete and twisted steel. One of the support legs had crumpled. Half the pile of rubble that had been Mira's platform was now a crater. Mira, he shouted up into the dust. A figure coughed and rolled over near the edge. The hood was torn away, revealing short, pale hair matted with soot and blood. She dragged herself back up, pulling the rifle with her as if it were the only thing keeping her from falling through the world. Torres clambered up the shifted rubble, lungs burning. You're supposed to be unkillable, he rasped. Mira spat pink into the dust. Working on it, she said, voice rough. Blood ran from a cut across her forehead, tracking down into one eye. She wiped it away with the back of her hand, leaving a streak on her cheek. Your tower's going to fall, Torres said, feeling the wobble under them. Everything falls eventually, she said. She settled back behind the rifle, oblivious to the bruise already blooming along her ribs. The trick is making sure the right people go first. She fired again. The attacking line stuttered, slowed, then broke against the wall of bullets. Torres dropped into a crouch beside her. You can't stay up here forever, he said. When they realize you're the spine, they'll focus every tube and rifle they've got on this tower. You need 30 minutes, she said. Maybe 40. Long enough to evacuate the wounded into the hardened bunker, redistribute ammo, blow the outer fuel stores before they can use them. I can give you that. At the cost of you, he said. She shrugged, a small movement. My ledger looks ugly either way. Might as well put something on the other side for once. He grabbed her wrist. The tattoo, slick with sweat and dirt, pressed against his palm. You think this makes you a symbol? He said, harsher than he meant to. You think you have to die with it to justify surviving the first time? Her eyes flicked to his. This isn't about symbols, she said. It's about geometry. I'm up, they lose people. I'm down, you lose people. I know what the math says. So do you. He opened his hand slowly. The cat's paw stared up at him in sharp black lines, the broken circle incomplete. When that building fell, he said, I thought that Mark died under it. I wrote your unit off. I wrote you off. I sent a letter to an address that probably never got it. Your daughter died bravely. Your sister saved lives. The usual lies we tell to stay sane. They weren't lies, she said. She did die bravely. You're her, he said. You said so yourself. The version of me you knew, she said. The one who thought the flag on her shoulder meant the world made sense. She's dead. You brought someone else out of that rubble. Her mouth twisted. A weapon without an owner. You're more than that, he said, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. Nobody who carries this much and still comes back to the tower gets to call herself just a weapon. She stared at him a beat too long. Another mortar fell close, showering them with dust. Get off my tower, Commander, she said finally. You're my line of fire. He wanted to argue. He wanted order. He wanted to grab her by the shoulders and drag her down. Instead, he squeezed her wrist once, a clumsy, wordless acknowledgement, and scrambled back toward the ladder of rubble. As he dropped off the last block, her rifle cracked 3 times in quick succession. Each shot sounded, to his ears, like a promise. They survived. Barely. The attackers broke against Vega's inner ring and never quite reformed. When it became clear the tower refused to fall and the defenders refused to break, the momentum bled out of the assault. What was left of the enemy faded back into the rock and dust, taking their dead and leaving their ambitions. By dawn, the sky above the outpost was pale and washed out. The smoke had thinned to a bitter tang. Torres walked the compound in a haze, stepping around stretchers, spent brass, and men and women sitting with their backs to walls, staring at nothing. Ing met him near the command bunker. "Jammer's offline," he said. "We got a snippet of a message through from base. QRF is en route. Couple hours out." Torres nodded, eyes already drifting toward the tower. Mira had not come down. He crossed the courtyard and climbed, legs heavy. She lay where he'd left her, rifle finally set aside, her back against a slab of concrete. Her left arm was held tight against her body, the angle wrong. Her lip was split. Blood had dried rusty brown on her collar. Her eyes were closed. For one terrifying second, he thought she'd finally taken the out she'd been courting the whole time. Then she exhaled, long and slow, and blinked up at him. "You're late," she rasped. "Sun's been up for 20 minutes. The show's over." He huffed out something that might have been a laugh. "I was busy sending messages on radios that might as well be toasters." "How bad is it?" "Arm's broken," she said. "Ribs probably too. Ears ringing." "Hey, we'll see." "Concise assessment," he said. "You sure you're not from my side of the house?" "I've spent too long in too many houses," she muttered. He eased himself down beside her. The tower creaked, but held. "Base knows you exist now," he said. "They're going to be asking questions." "They already know who I am," she said. "Or who I was." "Someone somewhere stamped a D next to my name and put a date on it." "You could let them keep thinking that," he said. "Slip away with the medevac. New name. No ink. Disappears somewhere quiet." Her gaze drifted to her wrist. The cat's paw, ring broken, sat stark and oddly vulnerable against her battered skin. "They'd still be guessing," she said. "Still telling stories about the ghost in the tower." "Those stories kept my people steady when everything else was breaking," he said. "They matter." "So do the facts," she replied. They sat in silence for a moment. The wind pushed to the hanging tarp. Somewhere below, a medic laughed a little too loudly at some joke, the sound tired and brittle. "Do you regret it?" Torres asked. She frowned. "Regret what? Dying? Not dying. Coming here. Taking that tattoo," he said. "Letting that story wrap around you." She turned her head slowly, looking at him full on. Without the hood and scarf, he could see all of it now. The subtle asymmetry of her nose where it had been broken and reset. The old scar along her jaw, the faint freckles under the dust. "At first," she said, "I liked that it made people nervous, that it meant something to the ones who knew. And now," he pressed, "now it's like a word in a language I don't speak anymore," she said quietly. "It doesn't mean what it used to, but I can't quite bring myself to carve it out." He followed the line of ink with his gaze. "The broken circle. The claws. I saw my guys looked at it when you got here," he said, "like it was a joke. A reason to keep you at arm's length." "And now?" she asked. "And now," he said, "if I told them to jump off the tower because the girl with the cat tattoo said it was the only safe way down, they'd ask you how high." Her mouth twitched. "That's progress, I suppose," she said. Medical finally hauled her off the tower, protesting only once when a corpseman tried to take her rifle. They compromised. He carried the stock. She kept one hand on the barrel until they reached the stretcher. They tried to send her away. A week later, in a cooler tent hospital near the main airfield, Torres stood beside her bed while a colonel in starched fatigues laid out the options. "Your injuries qualify you for rotation out of theater," the colonel said. "Physically, you'll heal. Psychologically," he spread his hands. "You've seen enough sand. There are programs. Evaluations." "I'm not interested in being evaluated," Mira said, staring at the ceiling. "Then think of it as recalibrated," the colonel said. "Your record, what we can see of it, speaks for itself. The fact you're not a ghost, after all, is a complicating factor for some files. There are people who would like to talk to you, debrief you. Officially." Torres watched her jaw tighten. "People," she said, "or interrogators with nicer chairs?" The colonel's brows rose. "Nobody is talking about interrogation." "Then release me back to my contract," she said. The colonel glanced at Torres, then back. "Your contract will need to be reviewed in light of new information," he said. "There is also the matter of your past unit's classification status." "Spectre." "Don't say it," she snapped. He closed his mouth. Torres stepped forward. There's another option, he said. One that doesn't involve you being poked by a dozen different agencies looking for bragging rights. Mira turned her head slightly. Her eyes were clear now. The concussion haze lifted. I got a note from friend at Training Command, Torres said. They're building out the advanced marksmanship program stateside. They need instructors who have seen what long guns actually look like in the wild. People who know that distance isn't just a number on a range card. You could teach. Mira snorted softly. You want me to stand on a nice clean concrete pad and show wide-eyed kids how to put holes in paper? I want you to help them learn how not to become names on the wall, Torres said. You have a skill set that turned a doomed outpost into something that still has bodies walking around. That shouldn't be a story whispered in classified briefings. That should be muscle memory in as many soldiers as we can get. The colonel gave a small shrug. Training Command is interested, under strict guidelines. Your file would stay sealed. They'd know you as Mira, or another name of your choosing. They don't need the ghost. They need the math. She was quiet for a long time. What if I'm not safe to have around kids with rifles? She said finally. Your psych people wouldn't call me stable. You're more honest about the weight of this job than half the people I've met in it, Torres said. That alone makes you safer. Her fingers drifted to her wrist, tracing the tattoo. What about this? She asked. I can't exactly wear long sleeves forever. The colonel coughed. We can classify it as personal. We don't regulate all ink. You'd be one among many. To someone who doesn't know what it means, it's just a cat-paw. Oakley's laughter from that first day flickered through Torres's memory. Let them joke, he said. It's better than them knowing too much. She looked between them. At last, she sighed. You realize, she said, that if you put me in a classroom, some bright kid is going to Google all the wrong things and stumble onto the legend. Then you get to show them there's a human being behind it, Torres replied. One who bleeds, breaks bones, and still came back. Her mouth twisted. And if I say no, then I sign whatever discharge papers you want, Torres said. And you disappear. Again. But this time it's your choice, not just the system's. Her eyes searched his face as if she could see all his motives laid out behind his eyes. You feel guilty, she said quietly. He didn't flinch. Every day. Because you zipped that bag, she went on. Because I walked away thinking that was the only ending you could get, he said. And then, years later, you drop out of smoke onto my outpost and remind me that sometimes we're wrong. I like to do something with that second chance that isn't just another chalk mark on a mission board. Silence stretched. Finally, she said, if I do this, I'm not that call sign anymore. Good, Torres said. You shouldn't have to be. She held out her right hand. Then we start over, she said. I'm Mira Kovac. No ghosts. He took her hand, gripping firmly. Mira Kovac, he repeated. Nice to meet you. Her left hand remained on her tattoo. Training Command didn't know what to do with her at first. She wore civilian clothes on base, hair pulled back, sleeves long. To the kids in their crisp uniforms, she looked like any other contractor, quiet, slightly amused, possibly dangerous in a way they couldn't articulate. The first day on the range, one of the sharper sergeants spotted the ink when her cuff rode up. Nice tat, ma'am, he joked. You a cat person? The line of trainees laughed. Mira looked at the mark, then at them. A dozen people made fun of this the first time they saw it, she said. Half of them are dead. The other half still send me messages on holidays, reminding me that I owe them drinks. The laughter died a little. But sure, she added, mouth quirking. We can say I like cats. She dropped prone, cradled the training rifle, and put 5 rounds into 5 steel plates at varying distances with a steady, unhurried rhythm. Your turn, she said, standing. And if any of you call the shot before you feel the break, I will know, and I will make your life very annoying. Within 3 weeks, her lane had fewer jokes and more questions. Ma'am, how do you deal with wind that shifts mid-shot? What do you do if you lose rangefinder function? How do you know when not to take a shot, even if you can make it? Sometimes she answered directly. Sometimes she told half a story and let them fill in the rest. Occasionally, when a trainee pushed too hard, wanting gory details or war stories to brag over beers, she shut him down with a look so flat he forgot how to swallow. After hours, when the range was empty, she sat on the bench by the berm, wrist turned up, thumb tracing the tattoo. It still looked like an old joke. Some days it felt like one. Other days it felt like a promise. Months after Vega, Torres visited the training base on a routine inspection. Or that was what he wrote on the paperwork. He found her on the range, naturally. The trainees were packing up, chatter bouncing thin in the cold air. Mira stood at the firing line, alone, taking slow, deliberate shots at a single plate at the farthest distance. He watched as she fired, cycled, reset. A metronome, human-shaped. After the fifth shot, she stood, sensing him without looking. "You're staring," she said. "You're easy to spot," he said. Small, armed, vaguely terrifying. She smiled just a little. "They're not afraid of me," she said. "They're afraid of failing in front of me." "That's leadership," he said. "It's also payback for what you put your instructors through, I imagine." She flicked him a sidelong look. "They never had to watch their legend walk into the chow hall," she said. "You're the one who made that my life." He shrugged. "In my defense, you made it out of the rubble yourself." They sat on the bench. He watched her thumb drift to the tattoo, habitual now. "Still thinking about getting rid of it?" he asked. "I tried once," she said. "Couple of years after the city. Went to a place in some industrial port. Guy had a gun that looked like it had seen more infections than ink. I lasted 3 minutes under the needle before I walked out." "Cold feet?" he asked. "Hot pain," she said, and the realization that scraping it off wouldn't change anything that mattered. "I'd still remember. The people who gave it to me would still be gone. All I'd have was a scar shaped like a cat." "Could be worse," he said. She smirked. "You know what one of the guys here called it last week?" she said. "He said it looks like a sad emoji with claws." Torres choked on a laugh. "And you didn't snap his rifle in half?" he asked. "I made him shoot with his non-dominant hand for the rest of the day," she said. "Consequences, not emotional responses." "Progress," he said. She was quiet for a moment. "Do you ever think about that night?" she asked. "In the city. The rubble." "I think about every night with rubble," he said. "Yours more than most. I used to replay it," she said. "Frame by frame. The way the ceiling sagged before it collapsed. The sound my spotter made. The moment the air went gray, then gone." Her gaze was somewhere far past the berm. "Now," she said, "I replay the tower instead. The way Vega held. The way your guys stopped laughing at my wrist and started handing me ammo without being asked." She turned her hand, studying the ink as if it were a stranger's. "They laughed here too, you know," she said. "First week. Whispered urban myth behind my back like I couldn't hear. Compared me to some video game character who never dies." "And now?" he asked. "And now they call me ma'am most of the time," she said. "And Mira when they forget themselves. One of them told me yesterday that he signed up for this course because he heard a story about a sniper in a busted tower who wouldn't come down." Torres felt something settle in his chest. Not peace exactly, but closer than he'd been in a long time. "What did you tell him?" he asked. "I told him stories are heavier when you're standing in them," she said. "And that if he wanted to wear a rifle seriously, he'd better like math more than glory." She looked up at him. "Do you think I'm still that?" she asked. "The phantom, the ghost." He shook his head. "No," he said. "I think you're the person who came back." Mira's fingers tightened once around her wrist. "Sometimes," she said, "when I look at this, it still feels like a weight. Like it's trying to drag me backward." "And sometimes," he prompted. "And sometimes," she admitted, "it feels like a reminder that I chose to keep going when someone decided I was done. That I owe that stubbornness something better than a body count." He nodded toward the range, where a couple of straggler trainees were collecting brass. "I'd say you're paying that debt," he said. She huffed out a breath. "One student at a time." "That's how it works," he said. They sat there until the air went cold enough that their breath showed. Eventually, she stood. "Come on," she said. "I have a night class. Apparently, these kids want to learn about shooting in the rain." He raised an eyebrow. "Do they know what happens to a legend's hair in the rain?" "Say that again, and I'll put your truck's tires through a very educational experience," she replied. He grinned. There she is. As she walked away toward the classroom, the lights from the range cast her shadow long on the concrete. For a moment, with the rifle case in her hand and the hood of her jacket up against the chill, she looked like the figure he'd seen stepping out of the smoke at Vega. But there were differences now. Her shoulders were less hunched. Her step was still light, but not like someone expecting every surface to collapse. And when she reached for the door, the tattoo on her wrist flashed under the fluorescent lights. Somewhere in some file, that mark was still attached to the word Phantom. Some analyst in a windowless room probably still swapped rumors about Spectre Claw and impossible shots. Here, on this range, on this night, it was just ink on a woman's skin. A joke once, a wait for a long time, and now, maybe simply a reminder. She had been underestimated, mocked, written off as dead. She wasn't. And every kid who walked off her range with a steadier hand and a healthier respect for fear was another small proof that ghosts could choose to live. Torres watched her disappear into the harsh-lit hallway and, for the first time since that day in the ruins of a city, felt like the story might finally be heading somewhere else. Not toward a perfect ending, but toward something that looked a lot like home.